Now, this morning I talked about the train attack yesterday, and I'm going to update on that and previous train attacks and the Kerch Bridge and other things along those lines. Just listen to what's going on here. So, this morning I started with is this Spiderweb 2.0? Ukraine just launched Spiderweb 2.0, it looked like, and Russia doesn't know what to do with this. Okay, so here we had Igor Shushko talking about breaking Ukrainian drones flew out of grain train car hatches and destroyed 13 Russian tanks and 100 armored vehicles. Okay, hatches appeared to open remotely again. That was what was reported. Then we saw that in Newsweek, Ukraine destroys 13 tanks, 100 armored vehicles as locomotive is hit. Ukraine has struck Russian train carrying military equipment, destroying 13 tanks and more than 100 armored vehicles. Now, I'm showing you this not because I'm trying to make a case or something. Sometimes we get things wrong, and sometimes we don't even know what is wrong. And I think that's where we are right now. We're like in a kind of, I'm not sure if we got it right or not. Okay. OSINT Defender posted this. The Security Service of Ukraine reportedly carried out another large-scale drone attack, and it talks about the same kind of facts. Operational Command South of the Ukrainian Ground Forces reports that Russia suffered losses amounting to roughly a regiment-sized unit worth of equipment and supplies, including 1 locomotive, 13 tanks, 103 units of automotive and armored equipment. Okay, now this is the part in question. It was reported and it was carried, but it might have been confused in the process of exactly what happened. Okay, so here's Igor Shushko again. The successful attack on the Russian train and the military equipment is reported by the Defense Forces of southern Ukraine. Details on the specific method of using drones hidden in the grain wagons are reported by a very pissed off Russian eyewitness. So you couple that with the eyewitness account, and here's the eyewitness account. And I read through this before, but basically, what are we doing? This drones popped out and flew to the front, hit the front of the drone or front of the locomotive, slowed it down, and then damaged everything else. So this is the eyewitness. Jane Kiev was talking about how Ukrainians are just smarter. It seems like Ukraine may have just done it again. Okay, so I'm reporting all the things that are out there. And then I see this as I'm looking for follow-up. Noel Reports posted this. I decided to take down my earlier post about the reported strike on a locomotive and a column of Russian military equipment, as mentioned by Ukraine's Southern Defense Forces Communications Center. After taking a closer look at the original wording, considering some helpful feedback, noting the lack of visual evidence, it seems that the claim might have been misinterpreted. The report appeared to link to a locomotive incident with the destruction of 13 tanks and over 100 vehicles, but those figures later showed up in a general 24-hour enemy losses summary. That same 13 tanks and 100 vehicles were part of the whole overall summary, like we saw here, right? Okay, so maybe we got our systems, our signals crossed here. Here's the actual report, just a little bit more here. So yes, a locomotive was mentioned as being hit, but there's no solid link to the other equipment losses. There's no visual proof of such a large-scale strike either. Apologies. Okay, so good on Noel Reports, and I'm reporting this as well, that, hey, look, maybe this wasn't what was thought that happened. Now, in light of what happened over the last week, which was just an absurd amount of gain for Ukraine in knocking out Russian planes and like rocket launchers and all kinds of things that have been happening, it seems somewhat believable. But here's the Southern Forces report. And if you don't read Ukrainian, as I don't, here's the translate. The Defense Forces of Southern Ukraine hit a locomotive with a column of enemy equipment. The enemy's losses amounted to 13 tanks and more than 100 units of armored and automotive equipment. Okay. So it looks like these are connected. They may be connected. I'm not sure I've gotten to the bottom of this yet, but if it's not connected, then these are separate things. And we know that a locomotive was hit, a train was hit, but we don't know that this was connected to that, even though it's clouded by this idea that this unthinkable blank up by our special services, there's no point in remaining silent anymore. The enemy destroyed a locomotive with tanks and a dozen armored vehicles. At some point, hatches through which the grain is poured began to fly off from railway containers. So there looks like a firsthand account So it's hard to tell which is right and which isn't, but I'm bringing this to you so that you're aware. Everything I'm doing is trying to provide context for you. Okay. Now, what we do know in the meantime, while I was searching for that, was that there was a cyber attack on Russian railways. Ukraine's GUR Cybercore allegedly disabled by Russian railway services. The ZD.ru website experienced a major outage caused by 6 gigs data flow and 2.5 million packets per second confirmed by Russian sources. Users lost access to multiple services. So that was happening, and that seems like it's confirmed. And then if we go back a week ago to the Russian train crash that was going on, and we didn't know then, was this caused by, and even in the video that I did, I was saying, okay, we don't know. Was this just bad repair and it fell apart? Was this sabotage? Was this false flag? Was this the Ukrainians? What was going on here? Okay. So the Russian train crash where the bridge fell down, and then the Russians were saying, see, they're killing these civilians. That's what they're doing. Okay. They came out and started saying that, but wait, there's more to the story. Russian train crash appears to be yet another Russian false flag operation to blame Ukraine. But wait, was a false flag meaning Russia caused it, or did Russia allow it? And it looks like the latter from everything I can detect. This is just commentary now, but even Russian state media understands that Russia wanted the passenger train to crash after blowing up its own bridge so they could later use civilian casualties to justify killing Ukrainians and halting peace negotiations. Now, I'm not sure that that's actually true. I'm not sure that they actually blew up their own bridge. Okay, so here's another article. This is in DW. Passenger train derailed in Russia's Bryansk region, which borders Ukraine, late Saturday after a bridge collapsed. So we know that the bridge collapsed as a result of an explosion, is what they have said initially. Alexander Bogzmaz, the regional governor of Bryansk, said on Telegram messaging app that 7 people died in the collapse, and then the Russians were all over saying, see those Ukrainians, they're attacking civilians. Okay, there was an explosion on the bridge en route while the Kilmovo-Moscow train was traveling with 388 passengers on board, he said on state television. Russia's investigative committee also said in a statement that, quote, a road bridge collapsed as a result of a blast in the Bryansk region at 10:50 p.m. on Saturday. Okay, so that's what they were saying initially. Now, more on that bridge collapse in Bryansk, which Russia says was T. I don't think that's what it was. One thing flagged up in the official report is the bridge collapsed 30 minutes before the train hit the wreckage. Emergency workers were already on site, yet no one stopped the train, so it's very dodgy. Okay. The automobile bridge collapsed at that time. A food truck was driving across it. Experts determined that all the bridge supports were mined. So maybe it was mined. I don't know, but it wasn't like, okay, so that's what's happening. And then the train hit it. So, okay, either the Russians are really stupid or they waited a half an hour for the full speed train to crash into a bridge and then they blamed Ukraine. So it's hard to even, like, this is a week later and we don't even know exactly what was going on with that bridge collapse a week ago. Okay. And so then we also talked about the Kerch Bridge being hit again. And this was just a few days ago. This was what, 5 days ago? 5 days. And you clearly saw the explosion, but the Kerch Bridge reopened later and they're still traveling and using it. So what gives? What was happening there? Are people just making stuff up? It's not that simple. Okay. So here is an engineer, one of my viewers sent this to me. So thank you for that. Kerch Bridge Foundation attack. This is by a guy who his whole channel is like talking about engineering and structure and stuff like that. So let's look at what he has to say here. And let's just listen for just 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
In this article, I've got links in the description to all these references. It says the bridge is supported by over 7,000 piles of 3 different varieties. Board piles, reinforced concrete piles poured in the depressions on site, what we call drill shafts, where you excavate a hole, you place a reinforcing cage, and then you place concrete from the bottom up and then connect it to the cap. Prismatic piles, blunt wedge-shaped supports, and tubular steel piles, those are typically filled with concrete after they're driven to their full depth. These piles were driven up to 300 feet below water level because of concerns about stability. And just another schematic that shows these piles supporting the bridge piers. Now I want to mention here from those schematics, the outside piles are what's called battered piles, and then other interior piles are vertical piles. Battered piles are installed to increase lateral stability. So you have wind loading, you have traffic loading that imparts a horizontal force to the bridge foundation, and so you can increase the resistance of the foundation to those loads by angling the pile from the vertical. Now, maybe some people expected this bridge to collapse outright. I'm sure Ukraine would have hoped for that, but I think there's likely to be significant damage to the pile foundation of this bridge if in fact it was a piled location. And the reason you can do a lot of damage and have the bridge still standing is that deep foundations, whether it's piling or drill shafts, are designed with a factor of safety. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that you've got a foundation that needs to withstand a load of, say, 5,000 kips, just to throw a number out there. And you would design the pile to have a geotechnical resistance of at least twice that, so 10,000 kips. And essentially a pile foundation where you've got a number of pile is a redundant foundation. You could destroy one of the piles, and if your cap is rigid enough, the loading that would have been distributed to the broken pile is redistributed to adjacent piling.
So that's nerdy even to my mind, but what I'm hearing him say is, like, if I'm standing and I'm on two legs and somebody kicks out one leg, I can still stand on the other leg. And that's probably what is happening. Well, it's more complicated than that, certainly with the Crimean Bridge, but that's the kind of thing that's happening there. Okay, so with that being said, that's what it appeared. Now, there's no doubt that the Crimean Bridge was hit, but it wasn't hit enough to knock it down. And so that's where we are. Okay, I'm going to finish with this article, which is the Ukrainians' new way of war, because they're very, very clever in the way that they've done pretty much everything throughout this war, technologically. How Ukraine is changing modern warfare. In the fall of 2022, Ukraine faced relentless drone attacks from Russian forces using Iranian-made Shahed drones. In response, Ukrainian engineers developed Sky Fortress, a nationwide network of acoustic sensors that tracks drones by sound. Now, did you ever wonder how they actually find and isolate and destroy these Shaheds that are coming every night? Well, they listen basically to the entire country, and they hear where those drones are coming and where the last one was pinging and the last one and the last one, and they can figure out what its trajectory is. In response, Ukrainian engineers developed Sky Fortress, where they can track drones by sound. Each unit costs under $500, offering a remarkably low-cost, effective defense solution. Ukraine's innovative approach was on full display during Operation Spiderweb, a long-range drone strike that reportedly caused billions in damage to Russian air bases, using drones costing just $1,000 each. These efforts are part of a broader shift toward what analysts call a flat war, a decentralized, agile military model that bypasses traditional hierarchies in favor of speed, adaptability, and frontline innovation. So I'm a management professor, right? My subtopic is specialty is leadership, and when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at this going, wow, this is like Silicon. So think about cities fighting with each other, right? Let's take Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which was known for making steel. And that's what their whole name was, or Allentown or something along those lines, right? And compare that to how agile Silicon Valley is going to be. Like, you're comparing what Russia is as opposed, and no offense if you're in Bethlehem or Allentown, Pennsylvania, comparing Russians' model and the Ukrainians' model. The Ukrainians are going to run laps around the Russians, which is still top-down command heavy, top-down command from the top heavy, right? So I'm very comforted by that. Ukrainian brigades now have the autonomy to recruit technical talent, collaborate directly with private companies, even manufacture weapons, including drones, 3D printing. Their core strength is their ability to rapidly iterate, adapt, and deploy existing technologies more quickly. So that's what the Ukrainians have done, and that's what even it looked like what was going on here with this first train attack thing that we're just talking about today. I may have gotten it wrong. I'm reporting what's in the news, and if I did, it's a retraction. but I don't know. I might need to retract a retraction because I don't know what I don't know. So, but take what was out here today with a grain of salt and come back tomorrow. And that made me think of this as a metaphor, right? Not everything looks like what it appears to be. This looks like these guys are trying to escape. They're really not. I mean, she's just waving a branch around, right? So it looks like one thing. It could be that thing, but it could be something else. And we just have to be patient and wait for the facts to emerge. Okay, thank you, my friends. I hope that clarified some things as much as we could with the facts that we know. Thank you for your trust and your willingness to listen to this. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.